Hey, what's up? Welcome back to another awesome episode of Lifeonaire Show podcast. I'm your host, Jason Wojo. I am running solo on this episode. We just got back from an awesome event. We were in the Wisconsin Dells. We did a Get-A-Life Getaway. We had, 110 people or so there, and it was awesome. It really was, and we had a bunch of people. It's been really honoring and humbling to see all the reviews that are coming into our Google business page. And it just reminds me of a few things. I want to share one of the big lessons I got from the event. And there are so many lessons that come from these events, and it's hard to really just boil it down to one. But the one place that I saw people kind of struggling with was like putting themselves first and giving themselves the opportunity to enjoy themselves and feel like, everybody else doesn't come first. And, this is something that certainly, not to be gender biased here, but certainly we saw this more with the females than the males, the women more than the men. But it's true for everybody. And some people, especially, if you have kids, if you have other obligations, it can be hard to really put yourself in a position where you feel, not selfish if you do something for yourself. And whether we're talking about going to the gym or whether we're talking about, not cooking your own food, or we're talking about, going to get a massage, if you feel guilty over doing these things, it is something that I believe will really wear you down and gradually kind of just ground you into the pavement. And you can't continue to give to other people unless you have your own bucket filled. Now, part of having that bucket filled is really two components to this. One is actually doing those things for yourself and not feeling guilty and not feeling shameful and not feeling like, you're letting other people down. But the other side of that is actually opening up the space for that and being able to do that, because this is something that was really, really powerful, as well as we discovered, and we had a few people share this of, one of the reasons they stay so busy is because they are afraid of the free time and they don't know what they would do with it. And, maybe they're running away from something, or they would prefer to not have that time to reflect or think, clearly, or there's been some hurt or trauma in the past. And, this is a way to keep their mind off it. And so it's kind of like this weird, vicious cycle that, they feel bad doing stuff for other people. They're trying to run away from something or not deal with something maybe in their personal life. And so they just keep working and not realizing the long-term consequences of this. And it is something that I believe will eventually catch up to you in one way or another. It could catch up with you physically, where your body will literally be compromised. And, there's this nasty hormone called cortisol that kind of breaks things down. It's catabolic and is not good for you. Lack of sleep. Of course, this catches up with us. Feeling overwhelmed all the time just leads to feeling burnt out, and, feeling like you're constantly on a treadmill leaves you tired. It leaves you exhausted. And of course, that's going to show up in just your general health, but it's also going to show up in how you treat people and how you view the world. All of these things stack. And so in this episode, I really wanted to point out some of those things, but I also wanted to kind of talk about, how to kind of create that time for yourself. Let's if we get past the value of this, and we can kind of move past some of the limiting beliefs that keep us stuck, we still have to actually create this time, right? We still have to find and carve out time out of our calendar to do this. And now that's one of the event's purposes, is we look at a calendar, blank calendar, and we have you really figure out what would you do in a perfect week. And you could do this on a perfect day, you could do it a perfect month, it doesn't matter. But if you weren't working and you weren't allowed to put work on that calendar, what would you do? What would you do? And imagine that you had, won the lottery and money was no longer a concern, or imagine that, this is something that you never had to worry about that again. What would you do and how would you spend your time? And so that's kind of the first step of really making it tangible for people, where they can see for themselves, what is it that they value most. Now, in all fairness, there are a couple exercises we do at the Get-A-Life Getaway in advance of this one, prior to this one, so that you can kind of get a glimpse of that. So for instance, we have people walk through some things if you had 90 days to live, what would you do? And that's just one of them. We have a few other ones too. But this really helps bring to light what really is most valuable to you and what's at stake if you don't do this. If you just continue on the path you're on, um, we're all going to die someday. And, in 3 generations, no one's going to remember our names. And, certainly I don't know my great grandparents' name. Maybe you know yours, but I don't. Um, and so like people are going to forget us. And that's a weird thing to think about, like that people really will not even remember we're on this earth. But it's also an incredibly liberating and empowering perspective as well, because it gives us the permission to do what we want and value what we want versus looking for others' approval or for others, pats on the back or acknowledgement. And it really lets us live for us. And far too many people just let that life pass by, and it just breaks my heart. Um, it's just such a short period of time that we're here. It's such a short period of time that we have the ability to do these things. And by the way, that time gets tighter and tighter as we age, and our bodies start to deteriorate a little bit, and our minds probably aren't as sharp as they were when we were in our 20s and 30s and 40s, and like this is just why I'm so passionate about pushing people into a space where they feel that liberation, they feel that freedom to do what they want to do and prioritize their life and the way they live their days, the way they want to live them. And so as they do that, like something opens up for people. And this is where really, like, once you figure out what you really want to be doing and what's on your calendar, then you can kind of backfill it with work. And I'm not going to go through all the exercises we do where I try to prove to people that this is 1000% possible. And yes, I realize if you have a full-time job, this may or may not apply to you. I'll tell you, in many cases, it's funny because I remember pre-COVID where a lot of employers were like, no, you can't work from home. You can't work remotely. And then all of a sudden COVID happens and you're forced to work remotely. And a lot of people be like, oh, this actually works. And so, but I won't pretend to know your exact situation if you have a W-2. But, for a business owner, you really can find quite a number of ways to get those things off your plate and focus on the most important activities. And by the way, this is why I wrote that book, Business for Life, right? That's why I dove into those concepts and those principles so that you can create the time, because like your business's function, the number one function is to give you the life you want. And so it's really important that you capture that and you crystallize that and know what that's going to look like for you on a calendar. Now, one of the things I also want to talk about here, as it relates to creating that time for yourself, is like, everybody's like, how is this possible? How can I only work 20 hours a week for example, when right now I'm working 60? But if you look at like what you're spending time on in your business, particularly, because this is a big time sink for most people, at least the people that Lifeonaire speaks to. Most of our folks, not all of them, are entrepreneurs or business owners or real estate investors, things like that. And if you really look at it, like you're doing this stuff you shouldn't be doing in your business. You're doing the things that could be outsourced or delegated for $20, $30 an hour, $40 an hour. You are not using automation. You have too much on your plate, so you haven't eliminated, right? This is the seed process stuff I talk about in the book. But one of the things that came up at this event in particular in the Dells was, we had a great discussion around this, is using people and delegating in your personal life. Now, we've done a previous episode on the Lifeonaire Show about this, so I'm only going to touch on some of the high level things here. And actually, I was having dinner. So at the event, we have optional dinners, which are basically a chance for all of us to get to hang out and just shoot the breeze and get to know each other better. And they can ask questions about the content, or we can just basically just realize we're all people and we're all moving in this same direction towards an abundant life. And I was talking with a woman, and she brought up how we were talking about this earlier in the day. She's like, oh, I just hired a household manager. And I'm like, cool. Like, so tell me about this. And so she found a woman who's going to be doing her laundry, her cooking, cleaning, some random, errands and chores, things like that. And she's paying her $23 an hour. And she was gonna hire her for 8 hours a week. Now, you guys know none of my degrees are in math, so I always use easy math. So let's round it to $20 per hour and 10 hours per week. So you're literally looking at $200 per week or $800 a month. And so think about this for a second. For $800 a month, how much time could you get off your plate of the things that you don't want to do and the things you really, they're not part of your vision. Now, if mowing your lawn is part of your vision, go for it. I'm your biggest fan. Like if it meets your vision, even if it's not of mine, like I am cheering for you. I used to enjoy mowing my lawn and I no longer do. And so I hired out. I used to enjoy cleaning my car. I don't anymore. So we have a detailer come to the house. And similarly, like whatever tasks or chores you have in your personal life, these are also the things that are kind of draining your attention and your time. And so, really consider finding some things in your personal life to hand off to other people. And it's not just because, and the point I'm making here is many of us are more likely to hire someone in our business because we make an association. Well, of course, we'll hire somebody to do these things in our business. That makes sense. Like this is business. But like a lot of those same people will have a mental hang up about hiring people in their personal life because they're like, well, I wasn't raised that way. And like, I shouldn't be on like, MTV Cribs and who am I to have somebody clean my house? Like I'm not that person. And we have this mental block. Many times this came from our parents, by the way. No shade on our parents. Our parents did the best they could. And they were taught the same thing from their parents too, by the way. But it's like, you clean up, like think about it. Like, certainly I know I've said this to my kids, like, hey, you clean up after yourself. And those things, we mean them and our kids should clean up after themselves. But when you take this lesson and expand it throughout your entire adult life, there becomes a point where doesn't have to be true anymore. I'm not saying to be a slob, but I'm saying like you can get help and you can have people maybe, do your laundry and do your dishes and cook you food and, mop the floors, and you're giving somebody else a way to make a living, but you're also cleaning up part of your life. And there was a woman in the event, and she's like, and she's just raised her hand. She's like, I have to say something right now. Like I shared, I hired people to do all these things. And like, it was the best thing I ever did for myself because like I'm able to show up to be a better mom. I can be a better partner. Like it just takes all the stress and things off my plate and my mind. And she's like, I'll never go back to doing it. Right. And so it was a really interesting conversation because like, I think for the first time, this is one of those areas that can kind of lie in the, under a rock somewhere and you don't really consider it, but this is a tremendous opportunity for a way to really kind of, increase the quality of your life in a fairly inexpensive way. Now here's the thing too, is like, not only do you feel better, have less on your plate, but you might eat better now because you're getting healthier foods, and you may be less stressed because you don't have to drive across town and wait in line and go grocery shopping, right? Like there's all these benefits to it, and you can so you feel better automatically by not having to do them. Then the other thing is like you now have extra time, and what are you going to do with that time, right? And what is the value of that time? If I told you could get back 40 hours a month for $800, like think about that's literally a full work week, a full American 8-hour a day work week. What could you do with that time? Like and I'm not saying you have to make more money with that time, although you certainly could, but and probably even a portion of that money you could make that $800 back. If you're a business owner, you're the one who's making it rain. You're the one who's working on those high leverage activities. But even if you don't, like even if you just take that time off, like think about how different your life might be if you just leaned into this and use this to your advantage, so that you had an opportunity to kind of really, do what you want to do, and for such an inexpensive price. That was one of the big lessons I just wanted to share with you guys from this last Get-A-Life Getaway. We have I think one more of these events for the rest of the year. I believe it's in Raleigh in October. Don't quote me on that, but you can check lifeonaire.com to learn more. And, from there, I'd love to see you guys at one of these events and see the changes that would occur for you. Everybody has a different breakthrough. Everybody has a different epiphany. We've heard from there's one guy who's at the event who actually he's renting out his house, or sorry, he's Airbnb and short-term renting his house. And he's actually right now enjoying kind of being a little bit of a nomad. And he's like literally living in a tent. And he's loving it. And he's like, you know what, when I don't love it anymore, I'll go back to my house. And so, but if you heard that in general circles, you'd be like, what? That's insane. Like, who would do that? What's wrong with this guy? Like, what is he thinking? Like, you'd have all these objections, right? But this is something that is like allowing him to live the life that he wants to live. And he's feeling kind of like obligation free. It's a reset. It's a chance for him to kind of like reevaluate his life. It's a chance for him to kind of like get out over the open stars and just kind of like evaluate things, right? But and there are so many other stories like that of people who were doing like the mainstream thing. They were doing the regular job, regular path, regular life model, and they're just realizing like they want something different. And that's another thing that came up a whole lot, and this always comes up to Get-A-Life Getaway, is there's no right or wrong. Like, you choose your own life, and don't let me or anyone else like influence you as to what you should want or what you should desire or should experience or have or be. Like, you got to figure this out for yourself. And it is hard because, many of us have been conditioned by decades of what we should do and things we've been praised for or acknowledged for. And so to get off that beaten path is a little bit challenging. And that's why, by the way, this event is 3 days long, so that you have that chance to unpack the things and really understand for yourself where you are, why you are where you are, some of the beliefs that have gotten you there, some of the beliefs that may have to change. So we really kind of go in A to Z and like what it takes to not only like unpack the decisions and choices and places that have influenced you, but also like where you want to go. And, that was one final thing I'll say about this is like, it's interesting. Like, so we had some people there. We had a couple in particular. They're awesome. They're a beautiful couple. And I didn't ask, but they had to be in 70s or 80s. They were seasoned. they were seasoned. And then we had some teenagers there, and that was awesome too, because, imagine being able to be exposed to these kinds of things early on before you make the mistakes that all of us adults make, right? Very, very powerful. So anyways, just wanted to share those few things with you. Hope that was valuable. And again, come out and join us at a Get-A-Life Getaway. And many of those people now will be joining us at Business Builder Workshop. We have one of those coming up here in a little while. Again, go to lifeonaire.com to learn more, where now that they've kind of identified like, hey, this is a 20-hour work week. I keep saying 20 hours because that's the average, but it could be anything from, 2 to, I don't know, whatever the number is. And they're going to come out to Business Builder to figure out how to make that a reality in their business. And they did it right, because, in a perfect world, you'd go to a Get-A-Life first, so you have the vision of what you want before you go to the Business Builder Workshop. But it doesn't always happen that way, and that's okay too. I never tell someone to wait. Get to whatever event is closest in terms of time, not location. And so I would do that if that's at all interesting to you. All right, hope you've enjoyed this, and I will talk to you guys next week. Take care.